What if everything you thought about Jesus was a lie? Some say Jesus never existed, that he's a myth. Just a copy of pagan gods, a story told too many times. But here's the problem. If he didn't exist, then history itself is lying. So let's put history on trial. Tonight, you'll hear from 3 hostile pens, 1 stone, and finally, the clock itself. 5 witnesses, 1 verdict. Ignore them, and you're not fighting Christianity, you're fighting history. First witness, Tacitus, Rome's greatest historian. A senator, a governor, a man of rank and power in the empire. And make no mistake, he was no friend of Christianity. He called their faith a disease. He described them as haters of mankind. That's how Rome saw believers, not as heroes, but as a plague. And yet, in his annals, Rome's official record of emperors and events, Book 15, Chapter 44, he records these words. Christus suffered the extreme penalty during the reign of Tiberius at the hands of Pontius Pilate. And a most mischievous superstition broke out again, not only in Judea, but even in Rome. Now, look closely. Tacitus doesn't use the word Christian like we do today. In the manuscript, he writes Christianos, and the Latin word Christus. Some scribes later corrected it to Christianos and Christus, but whether you read Christus or Christus, Tacitus makes it clear who he means, the followers of the man executed under Pontius Pilate. This isn't rumor. This isn't scripture. This is Rome's official historian, writing in Latin, naming Christus and Pilate directly. If even your enemies record your existence, guess what? You existed. Second witness, Josephus, the Jewish historian. He lived in the 1st century, right in the shadow of the events. Not a Christian, not a follower. He wrote for Rome, and he wrote for history. And in Antiquities of the Jews, Book 18, Chapter 3, he records, about this time lived Jesus, a wise man, if indeed one ought to call him a man. For he was a doer of marvelous deeds. He was the Christ. When Pilate condemned him to the cross, those who loved him did not forsake him. Now, some argue that scribes touched up his words. But here's the problem. Josephus mentions Jesus again. In Book 20, James, the brother of Jesus, who was called the Christ. Forgery doesn't explain away 2 separate mentions. It only proves one thing. Historians remembered him. Third witness, Pliny the Younger, governor of Bithynia, a loyal servant of Rome, a man charged with keeping order in the provinces. Around AD 112, he writes to Emperor Trajan, not to praise Christians, but to ask how to punish them. Why? Because their gatherings were growing. Because their loyalty to Christ was unshakable. In his letter, he reports, they meet on a fixed day, before dawn, and sing a hymn to Christ, as to a god. And they bind themselves by oath, not to commit fraud, theft, or adultery. Think about that. Barely 80 years after the crucifixion, Rome is already writing reports on Christians. This is not legend. This is not myth. You don't trouble the emperor with a fairy tale. You don't worship a fiction while eyewitnesses are still alive. Next witness, the stones themselves. In 1961, archaeologists uncovered an inscription in Caesarea. Pontius Pilatus, prefect of Judea. For years, critics mocked the Gospels. They said Pilate was a character of fiction. But then archaeologists uncovered the evidence. Faith can be debated. History leaves its mark in stone. They said Nazareth never existed in Jesus' day, just a literary invention. But excavations uncovered first-century homes, tombs, and pottery right where the Gospel said. In the catacombs of Rome, Christians carving the fish, the very name of Christ. In the 1st century. Legends take centuries. Christianity left graffiti on the empire's capital within decades. And finally, logic itself takes the stand. Every time you write the date, you're testifying. 2025 years. Since what? Since whom? Not Caesar, not Alexander, not Buddha, not Muhammad. The calendar resets on one name, Jesus Christ. Even time itself bends to him. And his mark didn't stop there. Hospitals, human rights, education, the end of slavery, civilization itself, reshaped in his shadow. A myth doesn't move empires. A story doesn't inspire martyrs. But a man, who was more than a man, does. So what's the verdict? Tacitus testifies. Josephus testifies. Pliny testifies. The stones testify. Time itself testifies. The question isn't, did Jesus exist? That case is closed. The real question is this. If enemies record his name, if stones echo his story, if civilization bears his mark, then who do you say he is? Merely a man? Or the living God in human flesh?
Don't be afraid. Come.
Because myths don't move history. Legends don't reset calendars. Stories don't outlive empires. But Jesus did, and he still does. History has spoken. Archaeology has spoken. Now, the verdict is in your hands. Think about it and get ready, because in the next video, we put that question on trial.